Hey, welcome to another edition of the Nonprofit Leadership Studio. Another great guest tonight. Emily Whitehurst is here. She's the CEO of the Houston Area Women's Center. Emily, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm so
Very
excited to
good.
be
Yeah.
here. Thank you
So
for having me.
we think, right, we had you here when you were the head of the Rothko Chapel.
I'm pretty sure.
About
I didn't
5
make
years
that up.
ago
Yeah,
or
I think that's
something.
right.
Yeah,
That's right.
So it's great to have you back, and you've just taken the lead. So you went from the Rothko Chapel to Planned Parenthood.
Yes, sir.
Were you the director of development of Planned Parenthood?
No, I was the senior vice president of strategic partnerships.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
Yeah, and so I supported or supervised the public affairs, communications, education, and development teams.
And then you just, in the last month, you've
Yeah.
taken over as the CEO of Houston Area Women's Center.
Yes.
Which is a stupendous organization.
It is. It's an extraordinary organization.
yeah.
It's committed to ending domestic violence and sexual assault for all.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of that transition for you.
Okay.
But first, I'm going to ask you what I ask everyone first, right?
Okay.
So Emily Whitehurst, the book on leadership, what is it? What are some of the chapters for you?
So I will confess, I had a little heads up about this question, and I thought, I really want to, maybe I will write this book. So I put a little
There you
time
go.
into it. So here I get.
Okay.
You ready? Here's
Yeah,
my
yeah.
time. I'm kind of getting to that point where I need to maybe get some glasses, but I didn't have them, so I'm going to hold this out and look very official. Okay, ready? Here are the titles of the chapters.
Okay,
It's going to
good.
be a bestseller.
Yeah, I know it is.
Yeah, and everybody listening today is going to go out and buy it.
Yeah, they will.
Or download it or whatever you do to books these days.
Yeah.
How to reimagine leadership as being not about an individual, but about collectives, coalitions, and collaborations. That's the title, but leadership. How to reimagine it about not being about an individual, but about collectives, coalitions, and collaborations.
So let's dissect that a little bit before
That's
we go to
the theme
chapter
of
2.
today's, we're going to talk about this the whole time because this is the theme.
So this
of
is
today's
really good, right?
conversation.
Because so often leadership is like, Emily is the leader,
That's what
Bob is the leader.
That's wrong. It's wrong.
But we know, right, that we're only as good as the team around us.
That's true.
Yeah. So
It is totally not all about the individual. Plus, philosophically, and we can go there today or not, there is no place where I stop and you start. We're just so connected.
Yeah. But yet we still call you the CEO.
And I think that is...
And you still build that team around you, though, right?
Yeah, so this is the thing. Clearly, we need, as a human family, at some level, the idea of a leader who kind of embodies an ethos and creates an identity for an organization or a cause. And I don't know that we will ever quench that thirst for a single thing, person.
Right.
But I think it is actually delusion. I don't think that's how movements work. I don't think it's how organizations work. And I don't think it's actually how leadership functions. And I think it's quite damaging to continue to nurture that idea. And I think true leaders realize that we really are not functioning in as solitary individuals. We just don't. It's just not how things function. Systems are much more complex.
Do you think it's sort of a male idea, maybe, that because men love this idea of them being a leader or having a leader? Do you think that's part of it?
Well, I'm sure that there are gendered notions there. I think it's a developmental prerequisite to individuate.
Yeah.
And I think, I think we have to do that. But I think transformative leadership, and ultimately for the kinds of systemic change that nonprofits at their best are about, we have to be reimagining it as about collectives, coalitions, and collaborations.
Yeah.
And so I have sub-chapters.
No, but I want to just, because one of the key things we've talked about in this class, and then one of the books that we read is all about getting the right people on the bus, right?
Yes.
So as a leader, you want to put together basically the leadership team, the team that serves as the leader. Is that the same thing? Is that similar?
I have two things to say about that.
Yeah.
There is no doubt that you have to have the right team of people, and I think there are great tools around that, whether it's the Myers-Briggs or the Berkman, to help you really assess. I don't know if y'all talked about those, to assess the team.
Yeah.
But I think oftentimes it's also about the processes. So one of the things I like to say, which I learned from a great colleague, mentor, teacher, is it's the processes, not the people, oftentimes. So I think sometimes we, again, tend to personalize dynamics or issues instead of thinking about how is it that we are relating? What are the processes that are determining the way we're interacting? And because people are quite adaptable. They're actually much more malleable and adaptable than we presume. And we essentialize people based on a sense of who they are, but they may be that way because you've put them in contexts or you've set them into a set of processes that are not effective. So I think good organizations have the right people, but they also have the right processes.
Right.
So maybe it's not a bus, maybe it's because,
it's a bus, but it's also the culture on the bus, right?
The culture
that's
on
a
the
big
bus.
part of
Yeah,
it.
the culture. Where they say culture eats strategy for lunch, or what do they say?
Is that what they say?
Yes.
That sounds good.
Yeah, you can have all the right strategy if you don't have the culture.
Culture, it doesn't work. Chapter 2.
Okay, how to be self-aware.
Oh, wow. How are you self-aware as a leader? Because I agree with that, right? I mean, I love it when I'll say some of my faults in front of some of my most senior staff, and they'll say, they're teasing me. They'll say, well, it's good to be self-aware, Bob, So, but I do believe, right? How many people do we meet that don't seem to understand what other people are thinking about them, right?
Yeah. No, I think it is really critical. And, the whole problem with being self-aware, especially I'm at work right now, is like, I'm sure there's really very many people in my life who would be like, oh my gosh, she's terribly unself-aware. So I'm just thinking, who all is going to see this? Yeah, so ultimately, I think the only way to be self-aware is to invite people in your life to interact with you, hopefully with loving candor, because the whole point is that you can't be self-aware unless that you can't be. You have these blind spots. So then that maybe gets to the culture, is that there has to be a culture of honest and affirming but honest feedback. I do think that there are practices that you can cultivate. For one, please don't have shame. If you have shame, then you aren't going to be able to look at the parts of yourself that you probably need to that are causing harm to you and other people. Now, I can't tell you I'm shame-free, but I hope on a good day I'm able to look at the parts of myself that are unpleasant and say, well, yeah, that's probably part me, and I need to be able to own that in order to mitigate the damage it might cause to myself or other people.
I often feel too that when I have really good young leaders that are working with me, they're often the ones who say, please criticize me. It's like I've had meetings where they say, you're not telling me enough about how I need to be better. And it's I don't know if I would have been that self-aware when I was that young, but I could tell these are people that are going to be doing great things. So one more chapter.
Okay. Okay, here's good. How to think outside the categories of right and wrong while still maintaining your moral compass.
Wow. Give me an example of that, Emily.
Okay. A specific example. Yeah, it would be good if I prepared that. Okay, so I guess I feel like, particularly in the social justice world or nonprofits, we're really driven by a fierce commitment to things that are what we think is right and wrong. And, God forbid we let that go, because that's what drives us. It's our passion. At the same time, I feel like sometimes we can get into fairly dualistic black and white thinking, and even kind of get attached to sort of a righteous indignation, and that it does really limit our ability to think creatively and to think in complex ways, and maybe even to articulate the really important work we're doing to a broader audience. But we want, so being able to think flexibly and think in nuanced, complex ways, or I don't like to think outside the box. I'm so tired of that. But whatever, think differently. Think differently, or think deeply. We get stuck because we are afraid. I think that if we go there, we will lose our moral compass. And so, what I was trying to figure out how to say that is, to think outside the categories of right and wrong. Things are more nuanced than right and wrong. But you can do that. One can do it. Even just if you say, okay, I'm going to have a thought. I can always come back to my right and wrong. I can try on. It's a flexibility thing. I can try on for 10 minutes. Give myself 10 minutes, 20 minutes to think differently about this, maybe in ways that are extremely uncomfortable. I won't lose my moral compass. I am deeply rooted in my values. Thoughts, my ability to think differently or think from a different point of view or hear other people's perspective is a different exercise than what I value. I'm not going to lose my values by virtue of having exposed myself to different types of thinking or tried on different ideas. I think we mistake that those processes.
Yeah.
And I think that really limits our leadership.
Yeah.
Can really limit our leadership.
Yeah. Wow. These are good chapters.
I tried to
Wow.
work on this for our
Yeah,
participants.
For the class. Yeah. So let's go through your work history, certainly in the last couple of years, because I think this is fascinating. You came to Houston to be the CEO of the Rothko Chapel.
Yeah, it was called executive director. But
Executive director,
Yeah.
but serving as the
Yeah,
leader
yeah,
of
yeah,
the
yeah,
Rothko
that's
Chapel.
right.
And tell us, for those that don't know what the Rothko Chapel is, it's an extraordinary place.
It really
Talk a little
is.
bit
It's
about
an
that.
amazing place. So the Rothko Chapel is a one-room art site that houses paintings by a painter named Mark Rothko, and they're a type of painting called abstract expressionist painting. So they're not necessarily of anything. They're these really large canvases, and they're very subtle. And what they do is they create a room that almost is. It's very simple and austere, and in many ways almost like a sensory deprivation room. So you go in there and it's very visually quiet. And also it's also quiet.
It is quiet.
It is
Yeah,
also
yeah,
quiet.
yeah.
And people come from around the world to experience this place. It is an art destination of global import.
Yeah.
But the extraordinary thing about this place is that it really is dedicated to the proposition that every person is entitled to their own spiritual quest, absent of any religious authority telling them how to believe or what to believe or how to experience the sacred. So this artist really felt like we should be able to experience ourselves and the holy on our own terms, or not. In fact, maybe there is nothing. Go there and experience it for yourself. Just
be there in
all you have to
solitude
just be
and see
there
the art
and be quiet.
And it's, yeah.
So that's it, and then they have
But you have programs
we
around.
have programs that are sort of works at the intersection of art, spirituality, and human rights. But the building itself is open for free to the public every day of the year, and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people come from all over the world.
It's one of the places I bring visitors all the time.
Yeah,
to
it's
Houston.
one of Houston's landmarks.
Yeah. And so how long were you there at the Rothko?
7 years. I was
Wow,
there
you were there a good long
just
time.
shy of 7 years.
And when you went there, how transformative was that job for you and for the Rothko having you as their leader?
Well, I moved to Houston for that role, so it was huge for me just personally because it was a real leap to come to. I came from Austin, so people say, "What were you thinking?" But I really believed in the place.
Yeah.
In Houston, but also in this in the
Rothko
Rothko Chapel. And and I gave myself fully to it. I really did. And when you do that and you really act out of your own conviction, it ennobles you. And I hope I gave to the place as much as it gave to me. It was also just a leadership boot camp because it really had. It was one of those nonprofits that in some ways had been blessed extraordinarily by a founder and funder, and the identity of the institution really hadn't kind of come out from the shadow.
Yeah, because people think it's part of the Manil, when indeed it's
Manil.
independent.
Yeah, and Ms. Dominique de Manil founded the Rothko Chapel, and so it really needed to kind of become an entity of its own, independent of her, not despite of her, but really independent of her vision for it, because it was a new day. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. It's not independent of her vision, but what would her vision look like today?
Yeah.
And that was a collective process that we had to go through with the board. It had financial implications. It had never really raised a lot of money.
Yeah.
It had to figure out how was it going to do that was still part of true to the ethos of the institution. There's some really fundamental questions that
there were some real challenges that
Big
you had. I
challenges.
remember as you went through that, it was like a big
Yeah.
deal. And then come to today, to now you're taking over the Houston Area Women's Center, a very large and important institution in Houston, indeed in Texas, and it seems like they're ready for a transformative leader as well.
Well, it's been around for 40 years. It's
Yeah.
in its 41st year, and it's got an extraordinary story. It started as a group of volunteers who just wanted to figure out how to help women who are escaping domestic violence or who had been sexually assaulted. And at that time, there really was not an infrastructure of organizations or agencies or funding to support women or men or children.
Yeah.
And it has grown now into a just shy of an $8 million agency, that works with the police department, the sheriff's office, the attorney general's office, the district attorney's office. And it really is a testament to the power of activism and of organizing and of just elbow grease. People who have said, we have a system-wide public health crisis, and we need to do something about it. So I think that 40 years is a long time, and I think the interesting opportunity that the organization has now is partly because of the cultural moment, where we really are.
There's a very large cultural moment right now, right?
Moment talking about sexual and gender violence and
the whole Me Too movement.
The whole Me Too movement.
Yeah.
And also, I think being able to really think about that not as just interpersonal, but also that it has extraordinary public health and economic impact. I mean, when you start thinking about what are the economic consequences of, women in the workplace not being able to function optimally because they're being harassed, or men, whoever it is who's being harassed. I mean, what if we start really framing it that way? And I think people are open to that. So that's part of, I think, the opportunity for this organization. And then I also think a big question for this organization, as Houston has grown so dramatically, how do we make sure we are meeting people where they are at? And we've had a central campus, we have a residential shelter that's in an undisclosed location, but the need is so great. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people that we don't serve, and how to really, if we're really going to be the Houston Area Women's Center, and we want to end domestic and sexual violence, then how do we really do that?
You don't want to just be the Montrose Women's Center. You want to be for all of Houston, the Houston area.
Yeah. So what would that really look like in terms of our campus, in terms of our services? We do have folks around, but I don't know that our identity really is felt palpably as regionally as we need to. But there are other organizations around that are doing great work and have shelters. So I think there's just lots of things that we need to think about.
It just seems like an extraordinary opportunity.
It is.
And what a great job for you to have, and I think you're the right person for it.
Thank you.
Tell me, give our viewers in the class, the students, an idea of your background. Where did you grow up, Emily?
I grew up in Austin, Texas. And I
Where'd you do undergrad?
I did my undergrad at Stanford University in human biology.
That's a junior university,
is
that right?
Leland Stanford Junior University.
You did it in biology?
Human biology.
Oh, wow.
I didn't spend a lot of time on plants.
And then you went to divinity school?
I did. I got a master's of divinity from Harvard Divinity School. And ultimately ended up getting ordained as a Presbyterian minister, and I still moonlight as a minister every once in a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do mostly as to do my friends' weddings.
That's
and
good.
If people will let me preach, I'm happy to preach anytime.
And did you go back to Austin to be a minister?
No, I actually served as a minister in Lawrence, Kansas.
Oh, wow. Wow. And then you went back to Austin?
I've been back to Austin a couple of times. I worked at the Texas Freedom Network, which counters the radical religious right. I really felt like that the moral voice in our country was being owned by a very narrow sector of the religious community, and I felt like there's a much broader conversation about how religious conviction can inform public life. So that's part of what the Texas Freedom Network did. And then I also served as the Houston has an interfaith ministry.
Interfaith ministries.
So I served as Austin's president of the interfaith organization.
Wow. Let me ask you a leadership question. As nonprofits, we tend to head on, we take on a lot of the leadership concerns, societal concerns and challenges. Sometimes they don't seem to be of our direct interest or direct interest of our organizations, but as leaders, we take them on. And today, and the United States has been part of this for a while, just looking at diversity in our community. And, Black Lives Matter has been such an important component of what's happening today that people are hearing. When you think about diversity, how does it, and oppression, how does it impact you and your leadership now at the Houston Area Women's Center or in your previous positions?
That's a good question. So when I think about, certainly in the American context or in Houston, systems of oppression, what I think about is that there is unequal access to power, to resources, to information, to the ability to control the destiny of your life. And that unequal access is distributed along lines of race and gender, ethnicity, immigration status, sexuality. And, without just mincing words, it's wrong, and it needs to change, and that there are narratives that are spun that make it seem as if the disparities are not due to systems of oppression, but are due to the flaws of the people who are kept out. And that is what is so toxic, because instead of acknowledging the reality that there has been historic reasons that have allowed people to maintain privilege at the expense of others, the story is spun that it's because people haven't done enough or done it right, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or don't have the innate abilities that others do, or don't deserve the access. And that goes hand in hand with the American story that if you just work hard enough, you can make it. And I think it is imperative that the nonprofit sector take a really strong stand against that story. And while we may be committed to helping build ladders for people to climb and sort of mitigate the damage of the systems of oppression, or shrink the inequities, I don't think we can do that at the expense of also truth-telling about the fact that the entire system is not set up equitably, and that even the philanthropic culture that we rely on is embedded in the systems of oppression.
It's hard to get away from it sometimes, isn't it?
It's impossible. We're in it. We're in it like a fish in water.
It's our boards. It's our funders. And when you speak out against it, you are alienating people, right? Who are many times feeding you.
It's very complicated.
And to think if you and I are alienated, how do people who are people of color, how are they feeling? Right? I mean, it's sort of an amazing thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, I think the challenge there is that, it's one thing for, I think when you say you and I, you're referring to the fact that we're white. So, our feelings may, what is not good is when you say, well, everybody's feelings may be uncomfortable or hurt, but for us, maybe it's just feelings, but for others, it's feelings plus like access to power and livelihood and security and safety. So it's not the same.
It's not the same.
Like, well, you may feel uncomfortable in this conversation, or you may feel, or we may feel unfairly held accountable for systems that we benefit from but didn't create. Well, I can see that's uncomfortable, but it's not the same as bearing the brunt of the impact of those systems that are unfair, intergenerationally. And so I don't know how, that's just, I think just have to hold that difference up, especially for people, who may not want to experience that discomfort.
Yeah, very good. All right, let's go to the Twitterverse and see what students are saying now. Let's figure this out. So Irene Norris, I've lost that. Let's go. Okay, this is an easy question. So Mike Martin wants to know, what are the differences that you've seen between Austin and Houston in regards to nonprofit organizations and how they operate? That's a softball question after we had some.
Softball question. Well, the scope and scale of the cities are quite different. The demographics are different. So these would be the differences. Austin, in many ways, is just, I would say, in some ways, just kind of coming into its own as a city in maybe the last 15 years. For so long, it had really operated there was the university, there was the capital, and there was a city. And then it just ballooned. And it didn't have a lot of the kind of infrastructure, philanthropic infrastructure. It didn't have its own, it just didn't have the same kind of heft.
Yeah.
Then the tech industry came, and it kind of diversified its economy, and it has now something that it would be a much more robust and diversified nonprofit sector and philanthropic sector. But so much for so many years, the life revolved around the university and the state,
Yeah.
the capital. So and in Houston's trajectory's just been so much different.
Yeah. It's almost, to me, it seems like it's easier to be in a big city to do this work.
Yeah, I think so. And Houston, Austin is sort of becoming a big city, but it's a really different dynamic, I think, than Houston.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah D wants to know, the divinity degree, how has that helped you in terms of your career?
Yeah, so I guess what I would say about that is, we long for meaning and purpose. Really, humans do, and we most times create that through stories. And the sacred stories of our religious traditions are, incredible resources for us as we, I think, seek to wrestle with these fundamental problems like racism, sexism, violence, how we raise children, all of those things that, and so, in that regard, it's been an extraordinary degree for me, because I think it helped me sort of draw on the deepest well of the wisdom of our culture, as well as look at some of the sources of our pain, the sources that are causing us pain.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, it does not help me read a balance sheet. It does not help me reorganize the chart of accounts for the books. It didn't give me a lot of management tools or experience, and all of those things have been extraordinarily critical for me to learn. I don't know if it's best to learn those things on the job or to have had some classwork in them. I only know that I've learned them on the job.
Yeah.
I think having good mentorship is critical if you don't have any practical training. I mean, I remember, not knowing why everything added up to 0 on a balance sheet. I just didn't understand. Well, why does it end up at, why is it all balanced out like that?
Yeah.
I didn't know,
But it is interesting though. I still learn almost every day. I still learn stuff, right?
And
so you will learn on the job.
You will, and that probably for me.
If you don't, you'll be out of that.
You'll be out. Yeah. And for me, I loved I loved that when in school I was learning the most esoteric, or that I didn't want to do practical things in school. That was my preference. I don't necessarily recommend that for everybody, but for me, I wanted, give me because I know I can't learn that stuff on my own. I'm going to need some real help with that. But I can't learn, there's no way to learn that by doing it.
Wow.
that was the stuff I really wanted to learn, so.
Emily McGovern wants to thank you for your work at Planned Parenthood. She said it was very important to her. But she wants to know, obviously a lot of controversy there, right? It seems like at Planned Parenthood there's always a battle going on. How did that affect you, and how did that affect the culture
of the organization?
Yeah.
It's a really great question. So in my experience, the more people know about what Planned Parenthood does, the more they support it.
Yeah.
1 in 5 women have been to Planned Parenthood. So we have the best the best thing Planned Parenthood could do to sort of break through the controversy is continue to provide excellent health care in the whole range of reproductive health care that we provide. It is an excellent question about how feeling like no matter how many wonderful patients you serve, how many STIs you heal, all sexually transmitted infections, how many patients you help, there will be lies spun by organizations that aren't providing health care, that have their budgets are solely dedicated to spinning mistruths about
bringing you down.
Yeah. So it's really painful and frustrating. It's also in its own way quite motivating, but it does take a toll on the organization and
imagine.
its staff. And you don't want that to be true, because that's what those folks want.
Yeah.
What I can say is that it creates a very sophisticated and dedicated staff. People are, able to provide excellent health care, because even our patients,
committed.
they're committed, and even our patients are subject to those misinformation campaigns, and yet are desperate for health care, because we do not have nearly enough healthcare providers. And in our region, Planned Parenthood is the third largest safety net provider of healthcare, period. So we have people who are in desperate need of just basic healthcare. And that's why the kinds of lies that get told are so damaging, because it really prevents people often potentially from just getting life-saving healthcare.
Does it? I think about, it's very different, but when I think of children at risk, we get a lot of accolades, right? People say, oh, it's so great you're working with children. But then when we start talking about how schools should be better, you have people, superintendents maybe who didn't do very well, and others that they get angry at children at risk, and it affects young staff especially. Like they like being liked all the time. How does it impact young staff when you have, I guess when they go in, they expect that there's going to be a little bit of this hate spewed, right?
Well, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think, when you go to a doctor's office and the receptionist or the person who checks you in or the person who takes your blood pressure, that's the same folks that we're hiring to just do. They don't necessarily, not everybody who works at Planned Parenthood is necessarily signing up for, they're folks that just want to do good work and have a job. So we have to do a lot of work to make sure people, but what my experience is, as soon as they get the opportunity to provide interface with the patients, whatever that is, and if they're not the direct healthcare provider, they're not the nurse, or they see the value of what we do and the need that is there, and very quickly they are able to dispel myth from fact.
Yeah. Wow. Samantha Alvarado wants to know, in your short term so far as CEO of the Houston Area Women's Center, what's been your biggest obstacle? Or what is the obstacle that you see on the highway in front of you, and how are you going to overcome it?
My gosh, I don't know. I don't see obstacles.
I'm no big challenges ahead.
Well, there's great challenges, but I don't think of them as an obstacle.
Okay.
I really, like, if I were to see, what's the metaphor? It's not like a road with obstacles. I see sort of maybe like, do you know the game, was it Chinese checkers or something? Like, I see just a field of possibilities with lots of different options. There's no right way, and I kind of have to sense the flow. And it's a collective process. I don't know the answer, because it's going to be a collective effort to figure out how are we going to.
It's part of the collective leadership, right? Yeah, figure it out.
Yeah, but I don't think of this as like a road with obstacles. That metaphor isn't quite the way I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
It's sort
Challenges, though? Do you have a bigger challenge?
Well, there's always the challenge of raising money.
Yeah.
Personally, there's always a challenge of trying to figure out what is the priority for today and what 50 other things can I maybe get to tomorrow, or will I not get to? I have a colleague who is like an executive assistant. I haven't had that in some ways ever in my career.
Isn't it nice?
Yeah, well, it is, except for, I just am learning how to figure out, and that person's role is to work with the board as well as be an executive assistant to me, sort of a joint role. Yeah. So I'm learning about just delegating in general, like how to do that well.
So the good thing about an executive assistant is that you want to network a lot, and it's really good at getting all your appointments scheduled.
Yes, I'm using that. I'm using that.
I love that. So, all right, let's find another question. So Kamaria Swan wants to know, how do you ensure a work-life balance when you're giving so much of yourself, and you do give a lot of yourself to your organization?
Yeah, well, that's critical.
And you have 2 kids?
That's critical. I have 2 young daughters. Yeah, this work-life balance it's a real.
Do you have work-life balance? Because so many people that we talk to here, they sort of laugh like, I don't really have work. I try, but I don't really have a work-life balance.
Yeah.
Do you have one?
I'm not sure what that means, honestly. To be honest, I am not. I don't compromise on a good night's sleep. Like I really, but that's like, it's not, if I don't have sleep, I can't function. It's for everybody's sake. So I really do, I'm committed to getting a good night's sleep. I really enjoy spending time with my kids. In fact, I was thinking, like, I don't get to see, I was talking to one of them, and I was saying, like, if I don't get to see them, like, my heart kind of gets really hard, and then it sort of crumbles up, and then I can't breathe. Something like I was just maybe being a little too expressive, and she's like, my younger was like, oh gosh, that's really bad. And I was like, well, maybe I was being a little dramatic, but I'm fine. Anyway, so yeah, it's like, it's really important to me, almost like at a physical level, to have quality time with them. So again, I don't know if you call that balance, it's like it's like emotionally and psychologically critical that I spend that time with them, and I start kind of acting out if we don't have that time. We all just start decompressing if we can't get good time. So I'm not one who needs a lot of social. I don't need a lot of social.
Well, you have kids. You have young kids, so most people don't have much social when they have young kids.
Yeah, so I do kids. I do work. Is that balance? I get good night's sleep.
You tell me.
Does that count? I mean, I feel pretty good.
I often think, when I think about work-life balance, the reason why I laugh it off is because I spend time with my wife and with my daughter, but I'm thinking about work all the time, and so I like it if, I go out on vacation, and if after 3 days no one emails me with any big problems, and then I start to have a balance. I feel like I start to think about other things except for work. So for me, it's not necessarily my personal time, because I do spend time with my wife, but it's
it's more your mental time.
Yeah, that's for me.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, I can tell you the only reason that I would be interested in that would be so that it could help me better think about work later. If you want to check out, so that then you can check back in a new way.
Yeah. It's good to do that, right?
Yeah, no, that's really important.
Yeah. No, I find that works really well as well. All right, let me find another question. So Myra Rock wants to know, early on in your life and early on in your career, what leadership lessons were you able to learn that you've now been able to incorporate, and they're sort of part of your leadership style? It's a good question.
It is a good question. So in my early days, I really was, I was involved in what I would call kind of community organizing. I did community organizing. I was doing.
That's what President Obama was a community organizer, right?
I'm not sure I was able to do it quite at the level he was, but because but yes, I was working with the organization called the Center for Third World Organizing, and we had thinking in terms of campaigns and policy wins and victories, and it required a lot of meetings with groups of people. And how do you kind of think about getting groups of people meaningfully engaged in things that are relevant to them and moving things along. And I will say, I think that was very useful.
Yeah.
It was very useful because I see so much time wasted in ineffective meetings.
Wow.
People spend so much time meeting, and it's just wasted time. And I haven't been in a corporate setting. I have to believe they do better on that, just because they've got to have a bottom line. We don't have the same kind of bottom line. So, but meetings where there's no minutes taken, there's no action items, there's no deliverables, there's no accountability, and they've clearly talked about the same thing for 5 times, and no resolution, no plan of action, and I just can't take it. And there's no results. It's like, and that is a problem.
So
to me.
have you brought that to your work, to your
Yes.
leadership style? Meetings are boom, boom, boom?
Well, I don't know if they're boom, 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 but even just in these first 30 days, I mean, the way the executive leadership team meets is totally changed. We have now an agenda that has, we're tracking it on the screen, we're taking notes, we're coming back. I mean, just discipline. Maybe community organizers have discipline. They have, or political campaigns. I mean, my first job was doing data entry on a political campaign, and I think it was Excel. I don't know if they had Excel back then. It was on a computer. I do remember it was on a computer, and I was doing data entry. But I mean, You know,
Wow.
data-driven now is real in vogue, and we do have a lot more data that we can use. But this idea that like it's results-based, people, we've got this. There are stakes.
Yeah.
There are things at stake.
Yeah.
We're not just sitting around like that.
Wow.
I feel that, and I feel like that came out of a community organizing model, not and this is I will use this,
Yes.
bourgeois nonprofit. It's community organizing. Lives are at stake. We got to get a win. There is a campaign. We are driving to hold people accountable who are in power, who need to do something different, like that kind of thing. Not just this,
Right.
And I don't think that was where the Houston, I don't mean to say that that's where the Houston is, but there are really good tools. If you don't know them, you don't know them, but they're just great tools you can use that in some ways come out of the business world, honestly, I think, for effective meetings.
Yeah.
Whatever, or how to manage a business line so that you
Right.
can keep track of your
Yeah, get them done.
You get 'em
I
done.
do notice that, first off, I remember interviewing for a job at a university, and it was for a vice president job, and they said, well, the executive committee, the cabinet, the president's cabinet meets every Monday morning, and they start at 9 and they continue, they meet until noon. Sometimes they order out lunch and they bring lunch in for the meeting. And I thought, I've never had a meeting that long. And I just, how can you possibly do that? So, and I find after about 45 minutes, meetings become significantly less effective. Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
But I mean, it's important. Meetings are important for our
Oh,
culture.
they're critical.
Sharing and being there together, communicating, letting people know what's
Yeah,
happening.
no, you
Those
got to
are-
have them. I
Yeah.
think that they are where work gets done. My kids ask me, "What'd you do today?" And I'm like, "Well,
Meetings.
I met.
Yeah.
I met.
I
did
feel
some-
like my job is meeting, but
My
it's a lot
job
of
is
meetings, networking meetings as well. So
It's
which is
meetings.
a-
Yeah. No, it is, but
It's all meetings.
yeah, it's meetings.
So Mia J wants to know, being a CEO, do you believe that you have to show characteristics of empowerment because you are a woman in a leadership position? This is Jamia Jacobs, sorry.
Characteristics of empowerment. Can you ask for clarity? Are you allowed to do that? No, not really. Characteristics of empowerment.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, you get to interpret it any way you want.
Well, I do think this is this kind of double bind that women often find themselves in. Where the role requires you to step into the space in a fairly sort of hierarchical leadership role where you're the leader, you're the decider. They can't, regardless of how collaborative or collective I am, at the end of the day, the board is going to hold me accountable for, the bottom, us making budget, making payroll, and not screwing up and delivering on the mission. And so, there is a healthy amount of just solo flying, and there's that kind of, I have to own it, I have to live it, I have to be it, and I have to embody it as me. And I cannot shrink from that in the name of collaborative spirit.
Right.
On the one hand. On the other hand, particularly for this organization, which really is grounded in feminist principles and is a women's collective history. It was started as a women's collective. It is really critical. And not only that, in my case, there are people at this organization who have been there for 35, 36 years and who, have an enormous amount of wisdom and expertise that I will never have. I will never have what they have.
Yeah.
So it's, there is an appropriate level of deference that I feel and need to embody on a daily basis for the folks who have put in that level of time and effort for the movement.
All right, let me do one more question before we go to the fun question. So this is Bobby Thomas wants to know, with such a large group of volunteers, how do you and your staff engage and make sure every volunteer feels the connection to the mission and that work is valuable?
Yeah, so
Great
we were just
question.
having a conversation about this today. It is a really, really, it is really challenging, this volunteer piece. We need volunteers. We need them to sort of do work that we can't pay to get done. So there is a dire need. It's also part of our strategy for enrolling a broader set of people in the work and hopefully changing outcomes around violence. But the volunteers, and this is changing, people there's less people who just have time to come and volunteer.
right?
They often now want to come in groups and have like a meaningful, not just individually meaningful, but like group experience. So the work on our end to figure out how to set up opportunities for people to come in and have meaningful experience is really challenging. And to do it in such a way where it's not like our job. It's not that we are just creating something for you, but we need to do it so that it will actually help us. It is really tricky. And then, in our case, and this was also true at Planned Parenthood, we can't just let anybody come. So there's, background checks and there's security questions. And sometimes the bar is just too high for just somebody who wants to just feel like they can show up and do something great. So it's a sticky question around volunteer engagement, but I think we've got to crack it because it's so important that the organization not be that it be permeable with the community and with people who are inspired by what we do and want to be connected, and we've got to figure that out. And I just want to say the Women's Center has a lot of ways to volunteer, and we have 1,000+ volunteers, so I think we're doing it, but I also think we want to do it better, and it's not easy.
Wow, very good. Okay, fun questions now. A couple. I'm going to just do two maybe. First off, your favorite restaurant in town?
Yeah. So what I'll say is that we go to the Carols and I go to Taqueria El Rey. Because they have they have chicken.
I love the rotisserie chicken there.
The rotisserie chicken is so good.
I think it's the best in town.
They have,
they have Cuban Mexican food.
Cuban and Mexican food. The girls don't like the plantains, but I love them. So those are like dessert. And then they also have their lattes are really good. It's Cuban.
You ever get the agua fresca there too? I always think those are really, really very good as well. So good.
The cantaloupe one.
Oh my
exactly.
God. Melon. Yes,
Melon. Yes.
So, and then if they're making the Emily Whitehurst movie in Hollywood.
I knew you were going to ask me this. I don't know.
Who would play you? And I was thinking maybe like Juliana Moore. How about Juliana Moore, right?
Doesn't she have red hair?
Yeah, but she could dye
Oh, yeah, well, I'll take her any day. She's
she
amazing.
Yeah. So if you want to tweet me who you think could possibly play Emily in Hollywood, we'll go to those real quickly. If you could tweet right away, I'll call some of those out. Who would play Emily Whitehurst in the Emily Whitehurst story in Hollywood? So let's see if we get any answers on that. Thank you for all the work you're doing. How long are you going to be at Houston Area Women's Center, do you think? I mean, you're brand new there. When you take a new job, Emily, what goes through our minds when you take a new job? How long do you think you're going to be there?
I want to be there at least a decade, for sure. And then, to the question, last question about empowering new leaders, I think that I don't want to stay there longer than I should.
Right.
It's really important. And I feel like at the places that I've left, I have left when I felt like I could stay.
Time.
I could stay. I could still show up and do good work, and I don't think I'd do harm, but it is time. And I want to get out of the way if in fact it is time. And it may be 10 years. I'm excited and willing and able and eager to, but if it's before then, I will leave before if it is time for a younger person to come in and take it to that next place.
Yeah.
I think we need...
Well, you're probably the youngest CEO they've ever had, though.
Probably. Yeah. I'm thinking of myself. I have to read like this.
You're like 29 or something, aren't you, right? So here we've had one, Charlize Theron.
Oh, I'll take her.
You'll
She's
take
a little
her,
taller than I am. But.
Come on. Hollywood. They do wonderful things with Hollywood. So, and here, one more came in here. Frances McDormand.
Oh, yeah, I like her. She's such a good actor. I'll do her. I'll take her.
And she has sort of that attitude, too.
She's tough. She's tough. That Fargo, whoever she was. Oh, man. No mess with her.
Emily, thank you so much for being here. So, hey, that's it for the Nonprofit Leadership Studio. Thank you guys very much for being with us this evening. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep up the great work. Take care.